Somewhere in the Pentagon right now, there is a map on a wall, and someone is quietly redrawing it. Not because of a press conference, not because of a campaign promise, but because for the first time in decades, the way the United States positions its forces in the Middle East no longer looks safe on paper. That is not speculation. It is the conclusion defense officials themselves are reportedly reaching after months of watching a strategy built in the 1990s collide with weapons built for the 2020s. And once you understand what changed and why, you start to see this moment for what it really is, not a single policy tweak, but the quiet end of an era in how America projects power in the Gulf. To understand why this shift matters, you have to understand the bet the Pentagon has been making for almost 30 years. Since the first Gulf War, the American approach to the Middle East has rested on a small number of enormous, heavily resourced bases. Places like Al Udeid in Qatar and naval support activity Bahrain became the backbone of everything the United States does in the region, refueling aircraft, coordinating naval operations, housing command centers, and projecting the kind of overwhelming presence that used to make the calculation simple. Put your best assets as close to the fight, and you can respond faster than anyone else. For most of that history, the bet paid off because the country on the other side of that equation, Iran, did not have the weapons to make concentration dangerous. That assumption did not hold this year. Over the course of a months-long military confrontation between the United States and Iran, one that began in late February and dragged into the summer, Iranian missile and drone attacks reached targets that had long been treated as effectively untouchable. Naval support activity Bahrain, the literal headquarters of American naval operations in the Middle East, sustained real damage. Reporting has described strikes hitting the headquarters building itself, along with communications facilities and satellite terminals. Add that to strikes across roughly 20 American military and diplomatic sites across the region, and you start to understand why the conversation inside the Pentagon changed. This was not a hypothetical vulnerability anymore. It was a demonstrated one. Before we go further, it is worth pausing on why this particular kind of damage rattles planners more than a single dramatic strike ever could. A base is not just concrete and hangars. It is a nervous system. Command centers coordinate everything from air defense to logistics. Communications infrastructure is what allows a base half a world away from Washington to act on real-time intelligence instead of waiting for instructions. When that nervous system takes a hit, the effect ripples outward in ways that are hard to see from the outside, but very easy to feel from the inside, in slower decision cycles, in degraded coordination, in the uncomfortable realization that the fortress you built to project strength has become, in this new era of precision weapons, something closer to a target with a flag on it. That is the tension now sitting at the center of Pentagon planning. For decades, the trade-off was simple. The closer you are to the fight, the faster you can respond to it. But that same proximity, once your adversary has the missiles and drones to reach you accurately, becomes a liability instead of an advantage. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, defense officials are now weighing whether to disperse capabilities across a wider network of smaller locations, reduce the American footprint in countries like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and even relocate some functions farther west, with Israel reportedly among the locations under consideration for hosting additional American assets. None of this has been finalized. Officials have been careful to describe it as an ongoing assessment rather than a locked-in decision. But the fact that this conversation is happening at all, at this level, tells you something significant about how seriously the vulnerability is being taken. If you are new to how militaries think about this kind of decision, it helps to know that debates over dispersing forces are not new in concept. Air power theorists have argued for years that concentrating expensive, hard to replace assets in a small number of locations creates exactly the kind of target set that a determined adversary with precision weapons will eventually exploit. A senior American official actually confirmed this to reporters, noting that questions about reducing reliance on a handful of large Gulf bases had been debated well before this year's escalation. What changed is not the theory. What changed is that the theory just got tested in real conditions against real weapons with real damage, and the debate that used to live in strategy papers is now living in urgent briefings. And this is where the story becomes less about buildings and more about trade-offs, because dispersing forces is not a free decision. It comes with a cost that planners understand better than almost anyone. Spread your aircraft, your logistics hubs, and your command nodes across more locations, and you reduce the odds that a single strike takes out a critical mass of capability. But you also slow down your ability to surge quickly when a crisis erupts, because coordination across a dispersed network is inherently harder than coordination within a single, tightly integrated base. Former commanders have pointed out something else worth sitting with, which is that moving operations farther west does not put American forces entirely out of reach. Iran's longer range missiles can already strike Israel and other parts of the region, meaning there may no longer be a truly safe rear area anywhere in the theater. That is a sobering thing for military planners to accept, because the entire logic of a rear area is that it is supposed to be safe. There's also a quieter, more practical detail buried in this story that tells you just how seriously officials are treating the threat from drones specifically. One challenge repeatedly raised by defense analysts is that the most effective way to intercept a drone is often not a missile interceptor, but fighter aircraft using rockets. And to use that method effectively, the aircraft has to get behind the drone in flight. In the tight geography of the Gulf, where distances between Iran and American installations are short, that maneuver becomes extremely difficult because there simply is not enough time or space to properly position an interceptor before the drone reaches its target. That single technical detail explains a lot about why officials are looking farther afield for potential basing options, because sometimes the most important strategic decisions come down to something as unglamorous as how many seconds a pilot has to react. While all of this has been unfolding on the military side, a parallel and less visible story has been playing out in Washington over money, and it matters just as much to understanding where this strategy shift is headed. Sustaining an extended military campaign is expensive in ways that rarely make it into public conversation until the bill comes due. Reports indicate that the Pentagon has been pressing Congress for a large supplemental funding package to cover the costs of the conflict, and that closed-door briefings meant to justify the request left members from both parties frustrated by the lack of specifics provided. When a military strategy is shifting at the same time its financial footing is being questioned on Capitol Hill, that tells you the pressure is not coming from a single direction. It is coming from the battlefield and from the budget at the same time, and both are pushing planners toward the same uncomfortable conclusion that the old model is getting harder to sustain strategically and financially. If you are finding this kind of grounded, source-based breakdown useful, this is a good moment to hit subscribe, because understanding how military strategy actually gets made, not through